For a second, I thought this birthday dinner was my mother actually trying to be kind. But when the waiter set down a cake that was already half eaten, I realized I was not the guest of honor. I was the entertainment. None of them knew I was holding a secret capable of destroying this entire family. I leaned over, whispered exactly one sentence to my uncle, and the laughter around the table stopped cold. My name is Quinn Jacobs, and if there is one thing I have learned in 29 years of existence, it is that family dinners are rarely about food. They are about hierarchy. I am a freelance brand designer. To me, that means I build visual identities for startups and help small businesses find their voice in a crowded market. To my mother, Darlene, it means I am essentially unemployed and playing with crayons until I find a husband rich enough to solve the problem of my existence. I pay my own rent. I pay for my own health insurance. I cover my own groceries. But in the Jacobs family ledger, financial independence means nothing if it does not come with a corporate title and a salary that can be bragged about at the country club. The notification lit up my phone screen at exactly 5:45 in the afternoon. Just as I was finishing a client call, it was from Maya, my cousin, the only person in my bloodline who seemed to view me as a human being rather than a cautionary tale. Just come, but brace yourself. 5 words, no emojis. Maya knew the drill. She knew that my birthday dinners were never actually for me. They were annual performance reviews where I was the only employee failing to meet quotas. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to fake a migraine or a deadline, but the guilt is a mechanism my mother installed early, and it runs deeper than my desire for peace. I typed back a simple okay, and went to the closet to find something that said, "I am doing fine," without screaming, "I am trying too hard." I chose a navy blazer and dark jeans, professional but casual, armor. The venue this year was the Hearthstone. It was a mock rustic establishment in the suburbs that charged $30 for a burger because they served it on a piece of reclaimed slate. It was exactly the kind of place my mother loved. It felt expensive. It looked good in photos. And it was loud enough to mask the hollowness of our conversations. I parked my 10-year-old sedan between a pristine white SUV and a luxury sedan that likely cost more than my entire college education. I took a breath, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, and told myself that this year might be different. I was turning 29. That was almost 30. Surely, we had all aged out of the petty dynamics that defined my 20s. Maybe tonight we would just eat steak and talk about the weather. I was wrong the moment I walked through the heavy oak doors. They were already seated at a large round table near the center of the room. My mother, Darlene, was wearing a floral dress that seemed to vibrate under the warm lighting. She was talking with her hands, gesturing wildly to my sister, Kendra. Kendra sat with the posture of a queen, her perfect blonde blowout catching the light, nodding with that benevolent smile she reserved for her fans and her family. My father, Walt, was there too, occupying space but displacing no air, staring at the breadbasket as if it held the secrets of the universe. And then there was Uncle Gavin. You could hear Gavin before you saw him. He was laughing at something the server had said, a booming, wet sound that made people at nearby tables glance over. He looked flushed, his tie loosened, looking every inch the jovial patriarch he pretended to be. I walked up to the table. Maya saw me first. She was sitting on the far side, squeezed between Gavin and an empty chair. Her eyes met mine, and she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was the signal. The show was starting. "Happy birthday!" my mother shrieked when she finally noticed me. She did not stand up to hug me. She just extended a hand and wiggled her fingers, gesturing for me to come closer so she could inspect me. "You are late. Quinn, we were about to order appetizers." I checked my watch. It was 6 o'clock on the dot. "I am right on time." "Mom," I said, taking the seat next to Maya. "Well, Kendra has been here for 15 minutes, Darlene said, turning her smile back to my sister. "She came straight from the office. You know she was just promoted to Senior Vice President of Marketing, and she still made time." Here it was, the opening salvo. "That is great, Kendra," I said, unfolding my napkin. Congratulations. Thanks. Quinn, Kendra said. Her voice was smooth, polished by years of corporate presentations. It has been crazy. I am managing a team of 40 people now. Sometimes I honestly miss the days when I had zero responsibility. You are so lucky you get to make your own schedule. Must be nice to just sleep in if you do not feel like working. I felt the familiar heat rise in my neck. I do not sleep in. Kendra, I have clients in 3 different time zones. I was up at 5 this morning. Gavin let out a snort, reaching for his glass of wine. Clients? He chuckled. That is what we are calling them now? I talked to a guy the other day who said he was a freelance consultant. Turned out he was driving for a rideshare app. The table rippled with polite, suffocated laughter. My father offered a weak smile, not looking at me. Maya stiffened beside me. I felt her foot tap against mine under the table. A warning. Do not engage. Do not take the bait. I am actually doing really well, I said, keeping my voice level. I just landed a contract with a tech startup in Austin. It is a 6-month project. That is nice, honey, my mother said, her eyes already drifting away from me. She picked up her phone, tapping the screen with a manicured nail. But do they pay you real money, or is it strictly exposure? I worry about you. Quinn, I really do. You are 29. By the time Kendra was 29, she had already bought the lake house. I looked at Kendra. She was examining her manicure, feigning modesty. Different paths. Mom, I said. Right, different, Gavin said. He leaned forward, his breath smelling of expensive Merlot and stale cigarettes. You know, if you ever need a real job, I could probably pull some strings at the dealership. We need someone to run the social media page, take pictures of cars. That is what you do, right? Pictures? I design brand strategies. Gavin, I do not take pictures of cars. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. He waved a dismissive hand. Offer stands, but you would have to wake up before noon. Again, the laughter. It was not malicious, or at least, they would never admit it was malicious. It was the laughter of a group of people who had decided long ago who I was and refused to let any new evidence change their minds. I was the screw-up, the dreamer, the one who needed to be managed. To acknowledge my success would be to admit their judgment was flawed, and the Jacobs family did not make flaws. I picked up my water glass and took a long sip. The water was lukewarm. So, Walt? Gavin boomed, pivoting the conversation instantly. How is the golf game? You still slicing that drive on the 9th hole? My father mumbled something about his shoulder acting up, and the spotlight mercifully shifted. I exhaled, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. I just needed to get through 2 hours. 120 minutes. I could do this. I would eat my salad, smile when appropriate, decline the passive-aggressive offers of employment, and then I would go home to my quiet apartment and bill my new client $2,000 for the logo package I finished this morning. I looked over at Maya. She was pushing a piece of calamari around her plate. She glanced at me and mouthed, "Sorry." "It is fine," I mouthed back. But it was not fine. The air at the table felt heavy, thick with everything that was not being said. I looked at my mother. She was not listening to Gavin's story about his new boat. She was staring at her phone again, her brow furrowed. She typed a quick message, then looked up, scanning the entrance of the restaurant. "Is someone else joining us?" I asked. Darlene jumped slightly, as if caught doing something illicit. "What? No, of course not. It is just family tonight. Just us." "Then who are you texting?" "I am not texting anyone. Quinn, stop being paranoid. I am checking the time. I want everything to be perfect." She set the phone down, face up, next to her plate. 2 seconds later, it buzzed. Her eyes darted to it immediately. She read the notification, and a strange, tight smile spread across her face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a director who just realized the actors were finally hitting their marks. I checked the time on my own phone. 6:30. "So, Quinn," Kendra said, leaning in, "are you seeing anyone? Or is that also a freelance situation? I gripped my fork. No, Kendra, I am single. Mom told me you were dating a barista, she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. I went on one date with a coffee shop owner 3 months ago. I corrected. He owns the shop. He does not just work there. Darlene sighed loudly. Well, it obviously did not work out. I just want you to be settled. Quinn, I hate thinking of you alone in that apartment. It is not safe in the city. I live in a gated complex. Mom. It is still the city. Gavin interjected. Crime is up 40%. I saw it on the news. You should move back out here. Get a nice little condo near the mall. Dad and I could help you with the down payment if your credit is… You know. He let the sentence hang there. The implication was clear. My credit was bad. My life was dangerous. My choices were wrong. I felt a sudden, sharp urge to stand up and flip the table, to scream about my credit score, which was 780, to tell them about the 5 figures I had in savings, to tell them that I was the only one at this table who had not sold my soul for a perception of stability. But I did not. I was a prop. This was their stage, and I was just the lighting fixture they dragged out once a year to make themselves look brighter by comparison. I will keep that in mind. Uncle Gavin, I said. Good girl, he grinned. My mother checked her phone again. This time, she did not just glance. She picked it up and typed a long response. Her fingers moved rapidly. She looked up at the waiter who was hovering nearby and gave him a sharp nod. Is it time for the main course? Walt asked, looking hopeful. Not yet, Darlene said, her voice trembling with a suppressed energy. We have a surprise first. A surprise? I asked. I hate surprises. My mother knew I hated surprises. Oh, stop it. Darlene waved her hand. You are going to love this. It is just a little something to celebrate. After all, 29 is a big year. It is the last year you can claim to be young. She laughed at her own joke. Kendra laughed with her. Gavin slapped the table. Maya reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was tight, anxious. She knew something I did not. I looked at her, but she refused to meet my eyes. She was staring at the kitchen doors, her jaw set hard. What is going on? I whispered to her. Just breathe, Maya whispered back. Just breathe, Quinn. My mother set her phone down with a definitive click. She smoothed the napkin on her lap and looked at me with eyes that shone with a predatory glint. I really hope you appreciate this. Quinn, she said, I had to pull a lot of strings. I looked around the table. My father was oblivious. Gavin was smirking. Kendra had her phone out, the camera app open, aiming it directly at my face. And then I saw the waiter coming through the double doors. He was carrying a large silver platter, holding it high above his head. But as he got closer, the celebratory atmosphere shifted into something bizarre. People at other tables stopped eating to look. They were not looking with admiration. They were looking with confusion. I turned in my chair to get a better look, and the knot in my stomach turned into a block of ice. My mother was still smiling. She looked like she was waiting for applause. Here it comes, Gavin shouted. Happy birthday, kiddo. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table. As the waiter approached, I told myself to be polite. I told myself to endure. I had no idea that politeness was about to become impossible. I had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, I would burn this entire bridge to the ground. The applause was thin, like the sound of dry leaves skittering across pavement. It was not the applause of people celebrating a loved one. It was the applause of an audience waiting for the punchline of a joke they already knew was coming. The waiter placed the silver stand in the center of the table with a hesitation that spoke volumes. He did not make eye contact with me. He looked at the tablecloth, then at my mother, and finally backed away as if he expected something to explode. I looked down. The air left my lungs in a rush, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. It was a red velvet cake, or rather, it had been a red velvet cake at some point earlier in the evening. What sat before me was a ruin. It was exactly half a circle. The cut side was not smooth or clean. It was jagged, the red crumbs spilling out onto the silver platter like dried blood. The cream cheese frosting smeared and gouged where a knife had hacked at it with zero precision. It looked like something pulled out of a break room trash can after a frantic office party. There was a single, lonely blue candle stuck aggressively into the exposed, drying sponge of the cake's interior, leaning at a 45-degree angle. For a moment, the table was silent. My brain tried to process the geometry of the insult. Half a cake, a used cake. Then, the laughter started. It began with Gavin, a low rumble that erupted into a bark. He slapped the table, rattling the silverware. Then Kendra joined in, a high, tinkling sound that grated against my eardrums. My father let out a nervous chuckle, looking at Darlene for cue cards on how to react. Darlene was beaming. She looked at the decimated cake and then at me, her eyes sparkling with malicious delight. "Do not look so shocked. Quinn," she said, her voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "It is perfectly good cake. I was walking by the private dining room in the back, where they are hosting that lavish retirement party for the senator, and I saw the staff clearing away the dessert table. They were just going to throw it out. Can you imagine? I told the manager, absolutely not. I said, my daughter is having a birthday, and she loves red velvet. Why waste perfectly good food?" She looked around the table, seeking validation. "I saved us at least $80, she added, looking at Walt. "That is simple economics." My hands were trembling under the table. I clenched them into fists so tight my fingernails bit into my palms. It was not about the money. My mother drove a car worth $70,000. She carried a handbag that cost $2,000. She had just ordered a bottle of wine that cost $120. This was not thrift. This was a statement. This was her telling me, in the most public way possible, that I was not worth a whole object. I was worth the scraps. I was worth what other people, better, more important people, had discarded. Kendra shifted in her chair. She held her phone up, the camera lens looking like a black, unblinking eye. The flashlight was on, blinding me. "Oh my God, look at her face," Kendra laughed, staring at her screen instead of me. "This is priceless. Quinn, say something. Tell Mom thank you for being eco-friendly." She zoomed in. I could feel the lens capturing every pixel of my humiliation. She was going to post this. She was going to put this on her story with a crying laughing emoji and a caption about how quirky our family was. "It is recycled," Gavin roared, wiping a tear from his eye. He picked up a fork and pointed it at the cake. "That is what you liberals like, right? Recycling? Saving the planet one leftover slice at a time. You should be proud. Quinn, you are saving the earth." I felt a coldness spread through my veins. It started in my stomach and worked its way out to my fingertips. It was a numbness I welcomed. If I felt nothing, I could not cry, and I would die before I cried in front of these people. "This is not funny." Maya's voice cut through the noise. It was quiet, shaking slightly, but it was there. The laughter stumbled but did not stop. Darlene waved a hand at Maya, dismissive as if swatting a fly. "Oh, lighten up, Maya," my mother snapped. "You are always so dramatic. It is just a cake. It tastes the same whether it is round or a semicircle. Do not ruin the mood. Quinn does not mind. Do you? Quinn? You know I am just being practical. You of all people should understand the value of $1. She stared at me. It was a challenge. She was daring me to complain. If I complained, I was ungrateful. If I complained, I was a brat. If I complained, I was proving that I was difficult, sensitive, and unable to take a joke. It was a trap she had set 1,000 times before. I looked at the cake. I looked at the jagged crumbs. "No. Mom," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, mechanical. I do not mind at all. "See?" Darlene clapped her hands. "She is fine. Now, sing. Everyone sing." She began to conduct the table like a maestro of misery. "Happy birthday to you," she sang, her voice soaring in a vibrato that was entirely unnecessary for a restaurant setting. Gavin joined in, bellowing off-key, Kendra sang while still recording, checking her angles in the viewfinder. My father mumbled the words, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Happy birthday to you. People at other tables were watching. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel their pity. They saw the half-eaten cake. They saw the girl sitting rigid in her chair. They saw the mother who looked too happy, and the sister who was too busy filming. They knew. Strangers understood the dynamic better than my own father did. Happy birthday, dear Quinn. Maya did not sing. She sat with her arms crossed, glaring at the cake as if she wanted to smash it onto the floor. Happy birthday to you. The song ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The single blue candle flickered, the flame dancing frantically as if it wanted to escape the awkwardness as much as I did. Make a wish, Kendra chirped. Come on, Quinn, wish for a promotion, or a boyfriend, or a personality. Gavin snorted into his wineglass. I stared at the flame. I thought about wishes. I used to wish for things like acceptance. I used to wish that one day I would do something impressive enough to make Darlene look at me the way she looked at Kendra. I used to wish that my father would speak up. But tonight, looking at that scavenged wreck of a dessert, I realized I had wasted 29 years of wishes. You cannot wish for respect from people who profit from your smallness. I looked up. I locked eyes with Darlene. She was smiling, waiting for me to perform the ritual. She wanted me to close my eyes, puff out my cheeks, and play the part of the grateful daughter. She wanted the photo op. I did not close my eyes. I did not smile. I did not take a deep breath. I simply leaned forward, my face completely blank, and blew a short, sharp breath of air. The flame died instantly. A thin ribbon of gray smoke curled up from the blackened wick, smelling of sulfur and burnt wax. Yay! Darlene clapped a few times. Finally. God, you are so serious tonight. It is a party. Quinn, try to look like you are not attending a funeral. She reached for the cake server, the metal scraping loudly against the silver platter. I will cut, she announced. Since it has already started, we do not have to worry about the first slice. Who wants the piece with the extra frosting? Kendra? I want the piece with the flour, Kendra said, zooming in on the carnage one last time before lowering her phone. I sat back in my chair. I felt detached, like I was floating near the ceiling, looking down at this pathetic gathering. I watched my mother carve up the scavenged cake. I watched her serve the best pieces to Kendra and Gavin. I watched her slide a plate with a crumbling, frostingless interior piece toward me. There you go, she said. Less sugar, better for your complexion. You have been breaking out lately. I did not touch the fork. I did not look at the plate. The waiter returned to refill the water glasses. He moved quickly, avoiding my gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the vibe radiating from our table. This is delicious, Gavin mumbled, his mouth full. You know, Darlene, you are a genius. Why pay full price when you can get top shelf for free? That is smart business. Exactly. Darlene nodded. Quinn, you are not eating. I am not hungry, I said. Suit yourself. She shrugged. More for us. Kendra tapped away on her phone. Posted, she murmured. Oh, look, 3 likes already. People love relatable content. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was probably the notification that I had been tagged in a story. I did not check it. I did not care. My eyes drifted to Gavin. He was wiping red crumbs from his lips with a white linen napkin. He looked satisfied. He looked full. He looked like a man who had never faced a consequence in his life. He was laughing again, telling Walt about a loophole he found in the dealership's inventory tax. And that is when the switch flipped. It was not a sudden explosion of rage. It was a crystallization. It was the moment water turns to ice, hard, sharp, clear. I looked at the half-eaten cake. It was a metaphor. Yes, but it was also a permission slip. They had broken the social contract. Families are supposed to protect you. Mothers are supposed to nurture you. If they could serve me garbage and call it love, then I owed them absolutely nothing. The rules of civility had been suspended by the arrival of that platter. I looked at Gavin again. I thought about the laptop sitting on my desk at home. I thought about the folder named Project Icarus. I thought about the emails, the photos, the adjusted timestamps. I thought about the secret that had been eating me alive for 4 months. I had kept it because I was afraid of blowing up the family. I had kept it because I was afraid of being the villain. But looking at the red smear on Gavin's chin, I realized something important. The family was already blown up. I was just the only one standing in the rubble. I took a sip of water. It was cold. It tasted clean. "I am going to the restroom," I said, standing up. "Take your time," Darlene said, not looking up from her plate. "But hurry back. Gavin is going to order an after-dinner cognac, and he wants to tell us about his trip to Vegas." I did not answer. I pushed my chair in. I walked past Maya. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with concern. She saw something in my face that scared her. She saw the ice. I walked toward the back of the restaurant, but I did not turn toward the restrooms. I stopped. I turned around. I looked at the table. They were eating. They were laughing. They were completely unaware that the girl they treated like a prop had just decided to rewrite the script. I walked back toward the table. I did not sit down. I walked straight to the side of the table where Gavin was sitting. He looked up, a forkful of red velvet halfway to his mouth. "What is up, kiddo? Forgot something?" he asked, grinning. The restaurant seemed to fall silent around me. The clatter of silverware faded. The music became a distant hum. All I could see was Gavin's greasy smile. I leaned down. I placed my hand on the back of his chair. I brought my face close to his ear, invading his personal space, breaking the barrier of polite distance. I took a breath, and then I delivered the line that would end the dinner and start the war. The distance between my standing position and Uncle Gavin's ear was less than 12 inches, but crossing that gap felt like stepping off a cliff. The air around the table was thick with the scent of roasted garlic, red wine, and the cloying sweetness of the mutilated cake. Gavin was still smiling, a piece of cream cheese frosting clinging to the corner of his lip like a parasitic organism. He looked comfortable. He looked safe. He looked like a man who believed the world was designed to accommodate his appetites. I placed my hand on the back of his chair. The wood was warm. I could feel the heat radiating from his suit jacket. He smelled of expensive bourbon and arrogance. He tilted his head back slightly, expecting a niece's submission. He expected a hug. He expected me to apologize for being weird, for not laughing at the joke, for being the difficult one. He was ready to be magnanimous, to pat my hand and tell me it was okay to be sensitive, as long as I knew my place. I lowered my head until my lips were almost brushing the coarse hair near his ear. I wanted this to be intimate. I wanted this to be just for him. I did not want Darlene to hear. I did not want Kendra to record the audio. I wanted the destruction to be precise, a surgical strike that would sever his peace of mind without leaving a visible scar for the audience. I took a slow breath, steadying the tremor in my chest. Then, I whispered the sentence I had been holding in my throat for 4 months. "I know about the compensation file." Time did not just stop, it shattered. I felt Gavin's body go rigid against the back of the chair. It was an instant, violent tension, like an animal sensing a predator's teeth on its throat. The chewing stopped. The fork in his hand, which had been halfway to his mouth for another bite, lowered slowly until it clattered against the fine china plate. The sound was sharp, a single porcelain chime that cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. I pulled back just enough to look at his face. The transformation was horrific and fascinating. The flush of wine and good humor had vanished, replaced by a sickly gray pallor that made his skin look like wet dough. His eyes were wide, staring at the tablecloth, but they were seeing something else entirely. They were seeing a future that was rapidly dissolving. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The laughter that had been bubbling in his chest seconds ago had died, strangled by 6 words. "Gavin?" The voice belonged to my mother. Darlene had been busy cutting another slice of cake, but the sudden stillness of her brother had triggered her radar. She looked from him to me, her eyebrows knitting together in confusion. She did not know what I had said. She only knew that the energy at the table had shifted from mockery to something dangerous. "What did you say to him?" "Quinn?" Darlene asked, her voice pitching up. "Why is he looking like that?" I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on Gavin. I watched a bead of sweat break loose from his hairline and track a path down his temple. He was not breathing. He was waiting for me to say more. He was waiting for the price. He was waiting for the blackmail demand. He was terrified because he knew exactly what was in that file. And he knew that if I knew, his life as the jovial, wealthy patriarch was over. Kendra was still holding her phone up, but the smirk had fallen off her face. She lowered the device slowly, sensing that the content had shifted from viral comedy to something she did not have clearance to broadcast. The red recording light was still blinking, capturing the silence, capturing the way her uncle looked like he was having a cardiac event, capturing the way her sister stood over him like an executioner. I straightened up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. The adrenaline was humming in my veins. A cold, electric current that made everything look hyper-real. I saw the dust motes dancing in the light of the chandelier. I saw the grease stain on the napkin. I saw the fear in my father's eyes as he looked between his wife and his brother-in-law, realizing that the script had been lost. I looked down at Gavin one last time. He finally raised his eyes to meet mine. There was no arrogance left. There was only naked pleading. He looked old. He looked pathetic. I gestured to the half-eaten mess on the silver platter. "Just keep eating the cake," I said. My voice was not loud. It was conversational. It was the tone one might use to tell a child to finish their vegetables. But in the silence of the table, it sounded like a gavel striking a desk. I turned around. "Quinn!" Darlene barked, scraping her chair back as she stood up. "Where do you think you are going? Sit down. We are not done here." I did not stop. I did not hesitate. I walked away from the table, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. It was a rhythm of departure. "Quinn, stop this drama right now. Come back here." Her voice was rising, attracting the attention of the entire dining room. Heads turned. A couple near the window stopped mid-toast to watch. The manager, a man with a perfectly trimmed beard who had welcomed us earlier, looked up from his reservation podium with a frown. I walked past him. I walked past the hostess stand. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the cool evening air. The silence of the parking lot was shocking. Inside, there had been the noise of expectations, of demands, of forced gratitude. Outside, there was just the wind rustling the ornamental trees and the distant hum of highway traffic. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that did not smell of recycled insults. I walked to my car, the 10-year-old sedan that Gavin had mocked less than an hour ago. I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. It was cold inside, but it felt like a sanctuary. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I waited for the crash. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing guilt that usually followed any attempt to stand up for myself. But the tears did not come. The guilt did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, terrifying lightness. It was the feeling of dropping a heavy backpack after carrying it for 20 miles. I had done it. I had pulled the pin. I started the engine. As I reversed out of the parking spot, my phone, which was sitting in the cup holder, lit up. One notification. Then two. Then a steady stream. Mom calling. I let it ring. Kendra. What the hell was that? Mom is freaking out. Mom calling. Kendra. Gavin looks like he's going to throw up. What did you say to him? Mom. Answer your phone. Quinn Elizabeth Jacobs. Kendra. Seriously, did you threaten him? Dad is asking for the check. I pulled out of the parking lot and turned onto the main road. The restaurant disappeared in my rearview mirror, a glowing box of yellow light shrinking into the distance. I did not look at the notifications. I knew what they said. They were the panic of a system that had suddenly lost control of its scapegoat. The phone buzzed again, a long, sustained vibration that meant another call. It was Darlene again. She would call until I answered, or until her battery died. That was her way. She believed that if she screamed loud enough, She could bend reality back into a shape that pleased her. She thought she could demand an explanation, demand an apology, and force me back into the chair to eat the crumbs of her affection. She did not understand that I was gone. I drove toward the highway, merging into the flow of traffic. The city lights were a blur of red and white. I turned on the radio, blasting music to drown out the buzzing of the phone in the cup holder. But even over the music, I could hear the phantom echo of Gavin's silence. Why did 7 words destroy a man who seemed untouchable? To Darlene, it was just a sentence. To Kendra, it was a weird moment. But to Gavin, it was the end of the world. He knew that I knew, and more importantly, he knew that I was the one person in the family he had never bothered to be kind to. He had spent years treating me like a joke, assuming I was too stupid or too passive to be a threat. He had mocked my job. He had mocked my car. He had mocked my life. He had handed me a half-eaten cake and laughed. He had forgotten the most basic rule of survival. Never hand a weapon to someone you have cornered, and never underestimate the person who cleans up your mess. I glanced at the phone again. A new message popped up. It was not from Mom or Kendra. It was from Gavin. "We need to talk. Don't tell your mother." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that felt unfamiliar on my face. I did not reply. I reached over and flipped the phone face down. Let him sweat. Let him sit in that expensive restaurant, surrounded by his half-eaten cake and his oblivious sister, wondering how much I knew and when I would use it. Let him feel the helplessness I had felt for 29 years. I merged into the fast lane and pressed down on the accelerator. I was going home, and for the first time in my life, I was not going home to hide. I was going home to prepare for war. The cake was just the beginning. The real main course was waiting on my hard drive. To understand why 7 words in a restaurant could dismantle a man like Gavin, you have to go back 4 months. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late August. The heat was suffocating, the kind of humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin the moment you step outside. I was working on a logo for a boutique bakery when my phone rang. It was Darlene. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was. She simply demanded my presence because her laptop was, in her words, holding her hostage. She claimed it was running slow. She said it was making a weird noise. She insinuated that if I did not come over and fix it immediately, she would lose months of important work. Though I knew for a fact that her work consisted mostly of browsing high-end furniture catalogs and managing the Neighborhood Homeowners Association newsletter, I tried to decline. I told her I had a deadline. She told me that family comes first and that she had already made pot roast. It was a lie. Of course, there was no pot roast, but the guilt trip was effective, as always. I arrived at her house at 4 o'clock. The laptop was sitting on the dining room table, a heavy, outdated machine that Gavin had given her 3 years prior when he upgraded to a sleeker model. It was a brick of gray plastic, covered in smudges and crumbs. "Fix it," she said, dropping her keys on the counter. "I am going to run to the grocery store. I need wine. Just delete whatever is slowing it down. I do not care what you do. Just make it fast again." She left me alone in the silent house. The air conditioning was humming. The clock on the wall ticked rhythmically. I sat down and opened the laptop. It was not a virus. It was simply a case of digital hoarding. The desktop was cluttered with hundreds of files, screenshots, and duplicate downloads. The trash bin had never been emptied. The hard drive was redlining at 99% capacity. I started the tedious process of cleaning it up. I ran a disk cleanup. I deleted temporary files. I organized the desktop into folders. It was mindless work, the kind of digital janitorial service I had performed for my family a dozen times before. I was about to close the email client to free up some RAM when I saw it. It was not hidden. It was not encrypted. It was right there in the sidebar, under the folder labeled Family, a subfolder marked with a yellow star, indicating high priority. The label read simply, Gavin, Incident 2024. I froze. I knew about the incident. Everyone in the family knew about it. A year ago, Gavin had been involved in a slip-and-fall accident at a luxury shopping complex. He claimed he had slipped on a wet marble floor that had not been marked with a caution sign. He had shown up to Thanksgiving wearing a neck brace, moaning about chronic spinal pain, unable to lift anything heavier than a wine glass. We had all listened to his stories about the grueling physical therapy, the sleepless nights, the loss of quality of life. I had even felt a pang of sympathy for him back then. But why would Darlene have a priority folder dedicated to it on her computer? Curiosity is a dangerous thing. It is the thread that, when pulled, can unravel an entire sweater. I told myself I was just organizing. I told myself I was just checking to see if these large files were slowing down the system. I clicked on the folder. It contained over 50 emails and a dozen PDF attachments. The most recent email was dated 6 months ago. The subject line was, "Final Settlement Confirmation." I opened the first PDF. It was an invoice from a chiropractic clinic in the city. I scanned the details. The dates aligned with Gavin's alleged therapy sessions. The treatment descriptions looked standard. But then I looked at the total, $450. I frowned. That seemed low for the kind of intensive treatment Gavin had described. I clicked on the next file. It was an invoice from the same clinic, with the same invoice number and the same date. But the formatting was slightly different. The font on the total amount was a fraction of a shade darker than the rest of the text. I zoomed in. As a graphic designer, my eye is trained to spot inconsistencies in kerning and pixelation. The numbers had been altered. The total on this second invoice was $4,500. My heart began to beat a little faster. I opened an email from Darlene to Gavin, dated a week after the invoice date. "Gavin, you idiot." The email read, "You cannot just change the numbers in Paint. The pixels are fuzzy. I fixed it for you. Use the version I attached, and make sure you print it on the matte paper so it looks like a copy, not an original. It hides the edits better." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. My mother, the woman who criticized my career choices and lectured me on the importance of integrity, was teaching her brother how to forge medical documents. I kept clicking. I went deeper into the folder. It was a masterclass in fraud. There were emails where Darlene scripted Gavin's symptoms. Remember, she wrote in one message, "It is not a sharp pain. Sharp pain means it heals. It is a dull, radiating ache that goes down your left leg. It causes numbness. You cannot stand for more than 20 minutes. Memorize this. If the insurance adjuster asks, you were on your way to a client meeting, which is why you were wearing the expensive suit. We need to claim the suit damage too." There were photos. I opened a folder labeled Site Evidence. The photos showed the marble floor of the shopping complex. There was a puddle of water, but something was wrong. In the corner of one photo, reflected in the glass of a store window, I saw a figure holding a water bottle. It was blurry, but the floral dress was unmistakable. It was Darlene. She had not just documented the hazard, she had created it, or at least, she had enhanced it. Then I found the metadata. I right-clicked on the image of Gavin lying on the floor, his face twisted in performative agony. The timestamp on the photo did not match the timestamp on the security report they had filed. The photo was taken 10 minutes after they claimed the fall happened. They had staged the aftermath. But the smoking gun was the bank document. It was a PDF from a major insurance firm, a settlement agreement. It outlined a payout for pain, suffering, lost wages, and medical expenses. The amount was $175,000. I stared at the number, $175,000. Gavin had bought a new boat 3 months ago. He had told us he got a bonus from the dealership. He had taken Darlene to a spa weekend in Arizona. He had bought Kendra a designer handbag for Christmas. They had not earned that money. They had stolen it. They had lied, forged, and manipulated a system, and they had walked away with a small fortune. I looked at the door of the study, listening for the sound of Darlene's car in the driveway. The house was still silent. I had time. I reached into my bag and pulled out my portable hard drive. It was my lifeline, the place where I stored my portfolio and my client backups. I plugged it into the USB port. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a sudden, clarity-inducing rage. I did not just copy the folder. I copied everything. The email archives, The edited PDFs, the original PDFs, the metadata, the chat logs where they joked about the insurance adjuster being gullible. "This guy is a joke," Gavin had written. "He didn't even check the mileage on the car." "Just keep your mouth shut and let me do the talking," Darlene had replied. "We are going to bleed them dry." I watched the progress bar on the screen. Transferring. 40%, 60%, 80%. The sound of a garage door opening rumbled through the floorboards. I held my breath. The progress bar hit 90%. I heard the heavy thud of the door connecting the garage to the kitchen. I heard Darlene's heels on the tile. "Quinn? Are you still working on that junk?" she called out. 99%. "I bought white wine," she shouted. "I thought we could have a glass while you explained to me why my printer never works." Done. I yanked the hard drive out of the USB port and shoved it deep into the bottom of my bag. I quickly closed the email window. I minimized the file explorer. I opened a web browser and typed in a random search query for how to speed up a laptop, just to have something innocent on the screen. Darlene walked into the dining room. She was holding a bottle of Chardonnay and 2 glasses. She looked flushed, happy, completely unburdened by conscience. "Well," she asked, pouring the wine, "is it fixed?" I looked up at her. I looked at the face of the woman who had raised me to believe I was inadequate. I saw the lines around her eyes, the set of her jaw. I saw a criminal. I saw a manipulator. And for the first time, I did not see a mother I needed to please. I saw a liability. "It is running much better now," I said. My voice was steady. "I cleared out the cache. You had a lot of junk files clogging up the system." "Good," she said, handing me a glass of wine. "You are useful when you want to be. Quinn." I took the glass. I took a sip. The wine was sour, but I swallowed it. "I saved you some money," I said, watching her carefully. "A technician would have charged you $100 for this." Darlene laughed. She took a long drink, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim of the glass. "That is why I have you," she said. "Why pay a stranger when family is free?" I smiled. It was the first real smile I had given her in years, though she did not understand the meaning behind it. "Exactly," I said. "Family is free." I finished my wine in 2 gulps. I told her I had to get back to work. I packed up my bag, feeling the weight of the hard drive against my hip. It felt heavy, like a loaded gun. As I walked out to my car that afternoon, I looked back at the house. It looked the same as it always had. Perfectly manicured lawn, pristine siding, a monument to suburban success, but now I knew the foundation was rotten. I drove home and uploaded the files to a cloud server with 2-factor authentication. I named the folder Project Icarus. For 4 months, I sat on it. I watched Gavin post photos of his boat. I watched Darlene brag about her financial savvy. I watched them treat me like the poor relation, the failure, the charity case. I let them talk. I let them insult me. I let them dig their hole deeper and deeper. I did not know when I would use it. I thought maybe I would never use it. Maybe having the knowledge was enough. Maybe just knowing that I held the power to destroy them was all the validation I needed. But then came the birthday dinner. Then came the half-eaten cake. When Darlene called me useful that day in her dining room, she had been right. I was very useful. I was good at finding things. I was good at saving things. And unlike them, I was very, very good at waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Gavin thought his secret was buried in a folder on a dusty laptop. He did not realize that I had made a backup. And tonight, as I drove away from the restaurant with the taste of victory in my mouth, I knew that the backup was about to go live. The silence in my apartment was usually a comfort, a soft barrier between me and the chaotic demands of my clients. But tonight, as I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter and kicked off my heels, the silence felt heavy. It felt charged. It was the silence of a courtroom before the verdict is read. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in the suburbs, my family was likely still at that table, or perhaps they had retreated to the parking lot to panic. My phone was still buzzing intermittently on the table where I had left it. Face down, I did not need to look at it to know the tenor of the messages. They would be moving from confusion to anger, and soon to bargaining. But my mind was not on the messages. My mind was drifting back to a rainy Tuesday last November, 3 months after Gavin's accident, and 1 month after the insurance money had quietly hit his bank account. I was thinking about Aunt Elise. Elise is my father's younger sister. She is the opposite of Darlene in every way, soft-spoken, kind, and perpetually unlucky. She worked as a librarian for 20 years until the county budget cuts eliminated her position. Last November, she had come to my parents' house for dinner. It was not a birthday, it was a plea. I remembered the scene with a clarity that made my stomach turn. We were in the living room. The fire was crackling in the hearth, a performance of warmth that did not extend to the people sitting on the leather sofas. Elise sat on the edge of the ottoman, her hands clasping a cup of tea as if it were the only anchor keeping her from floating away. She looked tired. The lines around her eyes were deep, etched by months of sleepless nights. She needed $5,000. It was not a lot of money to the Jacobs family. It was a rounding error. It was the cost of the landscaping Darlene had done in the backyard the previous spring. Elise needed it to cover her mortgage and a root canal she had been putting off for 6 months. She had brought a payment plan. She had printed out a spreadsheet showing how she would pay them back with interest once her unemployment benefits were sorted out. I watched my mother's face as Elise spoke. Darlene did not look sympathetic. She looked bored. She looked like a bank loan officer denying an application from a high-risk client. "I wish we could help, Elise," Darlene had said, sighing as if the weight of the world were on her shoulders. "But you know how the economy is. Our assets are all tied up in investments. We just do not have that kind of liquidity right now." I looked at my father. Walt was staring at the floor, unable to meet his sister's eyes. He knew Darlene was lying. He knew there was money. But he said nothing. He let his wife hold the purse strings and the power. Then Gavin had chimed in. He was lounging in the recliner, nursing a scotch. "It is tough all over. Elise," he had said, shaking his head. "I mean, look at me. With this back injury, I have been out of commission for months. The medical bills are piling up. I'm barely scraping by myself." I believed him then. I believed them both. I thought, well, maybe they really are cash poor. I felt bad that I could only offer Elise the $500 I had in my savings account. She had taken it with tears in her eyes, grateful for the crumbs, while the people sitting on the loaf of bread pleaded poverty. But now I knew the truth. I knew that on the very day Gavin told Elise he was barely scraping by, there was a balance of over $100,000 in his checking account. I knew because I had seen the bank statement in the Project Icarus folder. I knew that 2 weeks after they sent Elise away crying, Gavin had purchased a vintage jukebox for his game room. The cost was $6,500. He had paid in cash. He had bragged about it on Facebook, posting a video of himself dancing in front of it, a miracle recovery for a man with a debilitating spinal injury. They did not refuse Elise because they were poor. They refused her because they did not think she was a good investment. That was the currency of my family. Love was not a feeling. It was a transaction. Respect was not a right. It was a return on investment. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dark room. I clicked on the folder, Project Icarus. I scrolled through the files until I found the invoice for the jukebox. I found the receipt for the first-class tickets to Cabo San Lucas that Darlene had booked for herself and Kendra in December. I found the credit card statement showing a $3,000 dinner at a steakhouse the night before Thanksgiving. They had money for steak. They had money for vacations. They had money for toys. But they had no money for Elise's toothache. And they had no money for a whole cake for my birthday. That was the realization that had finally snapped the tether of my loyalty. It was not just that they were criminals. I could almost forgive the hustle if they were doing it to survive, or if they shared the spoils with the people they claimed to love. If Gavin had used that fraud money to help Elise, or to pay off my student loans, or to fix the roof on my grandmother's house, maybe I would have kept my mouth shut. Maybe I would have seen it as a Robin Hood situation, stealing from a faceless corporation to feed the family. But they were not Robin Hood. They were dragons. They sat on their pile of gold, breathing fire at anyone who dared to ask for a coin, all while crying about how hard it was to maintain the cave. I thought about Maya. Maya was the only one who seemed to smell the rot, even if she could not locate the source. I remembered a conversation we had in the parking lot after that Christmas party. We were huddled in her car, escaping the noise of the house. Something is not right. Quinn, she had said, blowing on her hands to keep them warm. Uncle Gavin says he is broke. But have you seen his watch? It is a Breitling. That is a $5,000 watch. And Darlene is crying about grocery prices while wearing a new fur coat. They are just bad with money, I had said, defending them out of habit. They put it on credit cards. No. Maya had shaken her head. It is not credit. You can feel it. They have money. They just do not think we are worth spending it on. She was right. I was not worth a whole cake. Elise was not worth a root canal. We were the background characters in their movie, existing only to applaud their success or absorb their cruelty. For 4 months, I had held on to this secret because I was afraid. I was afraid of being the one to tear the family apart. I was afraid that if I exposed them, I would lose my father. I was afraid that I would be painted as the bitter, jealous daughter who tried to ruin everyone's happiness because she could not find her own. I did not want to be the villain. But tonight, staring at the evidence on my screen, I realized that I was already the villain in their story. In Darlene's narrative, I was the disappointment. In Gavin's narrative, I was the punchline. In Kendra's narrative, I was the ugly friend. If I was going to be the villain, I might as well be a competent one. I looked at the folder. I had the power to end the charade. I had the power to make Gavin pay back every cent. I had the power to strip Darlene of her social standing. But more than that, I had the power to vindicate Elise. I had the power to prove to Maya that she was not crazy. I clicked on the email client. My phone buzzed again. I finally picked it up. It was a text from Gavin. Quinn, please, you don't understand the context. Let me explain. I can help you. You want a new car? We can work something out. Just don't do anything rash. A bribe. He was offering me a car. He was trying to buy my silence with the same dirty money he had denied his own sister. I typed a reply. My fingers moved confidently over the glass screen. I do not want a car. Gavin, I want you to remember Aunt Elise. I hit send. Then I turned back to my laptop. I did not send the files to the police. Not yet. That was too fast. That was too merciful. They needed to sweat. They needed to feel the walls closing in, just like Elise had felt when the bank threatened to foreclose on her home. I opened a new email draft. I attached a single file. It was the photo of the metadata showing the timestamp of the accident photo, proving it was taken after the alleged fall. I typed the recipient's email address. It was not the police. It was not the insurance company. It was Gavin's personal email, and I CC'd Darlene. Subject, first course. Body. The metadata does not lie. Neither do the bank statements. I am not hungry for cake anymore. I am hungry for the truth. I hovered the mouse over the send button. My heart was pounding, but it was a strong, steady rhythm. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I clicked send. The message whooshed away. I sat back in my chair and watched the city lights. The game had changed. They thought they were dealing with Quinn, the pushover. They thought they were dealing with the girl who accepted the half-eaten cake. They were wrong. They were dealing with the girl who had cleaned the hard drive, and I was just getting started. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when my phone began its seizure on the nightstand. It was 7 a.m. I had expected a reaction, but I had underestimated the speed at which panic travels through the Jacobs family nervous system. I picked up the phone. It was Darlene. I did not answer immediately. I let it ring 4 times. Staring at the contact photo I had assigned to her years ago, a picture of her looking impeccably groomed, holding a glass of champagne, smiling at something just over my shoulder. Finally, I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I just listened. Quinn? Is that you? Are you there? Her voice was tight, pitched an octave higher than her usual conversational tone. It was the voice she used when she was trying to return a dress she had already worn, feigning innocence and confusion. I am here. Mom, I said. I was sitting up in bed, awake and surprisingly calm. Oh, thank God. She let out a breathless laugh that sounded like air escaping a punctured tire. I have been up all night worrying about you. You ran out of the restaurant so fast yesterday. And then that email. Quinn, honey, were you drinking last night? I know you get emotional on your birthday. We all do. But sending nonsense like that to Gavin? You really scared him. Here it was, the opening gambit. Denial wrapped in concern. She was trying to frame my discovery as a drunken hallucination, a mental break. She wanted to give me an off-ramp, a chance to say, yes, I was drunk. I am sorry. I made it up. If I took the off-ramp, things would go back to normal. I would be the screw-up, and they would be the saints who forgave me. I was not drinking. Darlene, I said, swinging my legs out of bed. And we both know the email was not nonsense. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing change. The concern evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp edge. I do not know what you think you found on that old laptop, she said, her voice dropping. But you are clearly confused. Those were draft files, simulations. Gavin and I were just exploring hypothetical scenarios for insurance coverage. It is perfectly legal to run models. Quinn, you are not a lawyer. You do not understand how these things work. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to start the coffee maker. I am not a lawyer. Mom, I agreed, but I am a designer, and I know that when you use the clone stamp tool in Photoshop to duplicate a puddle of water, it leaves a digital footprint. I also know that you cannot edit the metadata of a photo to change the date without leaving a trace in the file history. The photo of Gavin on the floor was created on August 24th at 3 in the afternoon. The incident report says the fall happened at 10 in the morning. Unless Gavin laid on the floor for 5 hours waiting for a camera crew, you are lying. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head, recalculating her strategy. The confused daughter angle had failed. Now she had to move to stage 2, justification. You ungrateful little brat, she hissed. The sweetness was gone entirely now. You have no idea what it takes to keep this family afloat. Do you think money grows on trees? Do you think your father's pension pays for the country club? I did what I had to do. Everyone does it. The insurance companies are thieves anyway. They steal from us every month with premiums. I was just getting back what we are owed. So you admit it is fraud, I said. I admit nothing, she snapped. I admit that I am a resourceful mother who looks out for her family, which is more than I can say for you. You snoop through my private property, steal files, and then try to blackmail your own uncle? After everything we have done for you? After the dinner? After the cake? The cake, I repeated flatly. You mean the leftovers? It was red velvet, she screamed. It is your favorite. My God, you are so petty. This is about jealousy, isn't it? You are jealous because Kendra just got promoted, and you are sitting in that apartment staring at a computer screen making logos for pennies. You want to tear us down to your level. I am not the one who committed a felony. Darlene. Don't you use that word, she shrieked. Suddenly, there was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line, as if the phone was being wrestled away. Then, a new voice came on. It was Kendra. Quinn, you need to stop this right now, Kendra said. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear. She was furious. I am serious. I have a reputation to maintain. If word gets out that my family is involved in some kind of legal scandal, do you know what that does to me? I work in corporate branding. My background check has to be spotless. You are going to ruin my career because you are having a tantrum. I poured my coffee. The steam rose up, smelling of dark roast and clarity. Your career is not my responsibility, Kendra, I said, and neither is Gavin's bank account. You are destroying this family, Kendra yelled. The polish was cracking. The senior vice president was sounding a lot like a frightened child. Mom is hyperventilating. Dad is pacing around like a ghost. And Gavin? Gavin is talking about lawyers. Quinn. He says he can sue you for theft of data. He says he can have you arrested for hacking. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. Tell Gavin to go ahead, I said. Tell him to call his lawyer. I would love for a lawyer to see the file named Gavin. Incident 2024. I am sure the discovery phase of that trial would be fascinating for everyone. Kendra went silent. She knew I was right. Legal action required exposure, and exposure was the one thing they could not survive. Listen to me, she said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Just delete the files. Please, we can work this out. Mom says she can write you a check. How much do you want? 10,000? 20? Just tell us the number. Quinn. I felt a surge of disgust so potent it almost made me gag. They still thought this was a transaction. They thought my dignity had a price tag, just like their integrity. It is not about money, I said. Then what do you want? She demanded. An apology? Fine. I am sorry we laughed at the cake. I am sorry the cake was half eaten. Happy? Now delete the drive. Goodbye, Kendra, I said. I hung up the phone. My hand was steady. I took a sip of coffee. But the assault was not over. It was just shifting battlefields. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with a notification from Maya. It was a screenshot from Facebook. I opened it. It was a post from Uncle Gavin. He had not posted it to the family group. He had posted it publicly to his 3,000 friends and followers. The post was a text-only status update, set against a black background. It is sad when people you trust turn out to be snakes in the grass. Some people are so consumed by jealousy that they can't stand to see others succeed. They will make up lies and try to rewrite history just to get attention. Keep your circle small. Folks, the devil doesn't always have horns. Sometimes she has a freelance job and a victim complex. Family betrayal haters gonna hate rise above. I stared at the screen. The post had been up for 20 minutes. It already had 40 likes and a dozen comments from his drinking buddies and distant relatives. Stay strong. Brother. One comment read, jealousy is a disease. Ignore the noise. Gavin. Another wrote, you are a good man. He was spinning the narrative. He was preemptively painting me as the aggressor. He was banking on the fact that I was private, that I rarely posted, and that the family had always seen me as the weird one. If I released the evidence now, he could claim I doctored it out of spite. He was trying to discredit the witness before the trial even began. A second text from Maya came through. Maya. He is blocking anyone who asks what he means, but he is telling people in DMs that you are having a mental breakdown. He told Aunt Carol that you are off your meds. Quinn. They are going to bury you. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. Off my meds. A lie built on a foundation of nothing. I did not take medication. I had never had a breakdown. But in the court of public opinion, the accusation was often enough to secure a conviction. I typed a reply to Maya. Me. Let him talk. Maya. Quinn, you have to defend yourself. Post the receipts. Post the photo of the metadata. Shut him up. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the screen. It would be so easy. I could post the invoice with the altered numbers right in the comments section of his status. I could burn him down in seconds. But that was reactive. That was playing his game. If I engaged in a public mudslinging contest on social media, I looked just as messy as they did. I looked like I was participating in the drama. I needed to be above the drama. I needed to be the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. I closed Facebook. I opened my email app. I composed a new message. This time, I addressed it to Gavin, Darlene, and Kendra. Subject: The Sandbox. I see the Facebook post. Gavin, I hear the rumors you are spreading about my mental health. Here is the new reality. Every time you lie about me, I send one file to the fraud investigation unit at the insurance company. Every time you insult me to a relative, I send another, Every time you try to gaslight me, I forward the entire folder to the district attorney. I am not jealous. I am not crazy. I am the person holding the detonator. If that post is not down in 5 minutes, I will start with the invoice for the jukebox. Tick-tock. I hit send. I set my phone on the counter and watched the digital clock on the microwave. 7:45. 7:46. My phone did not ring. No texts came through. The silence was absolute. 7:48. I picked up my phone and opened Facebook. I went to Gavin's profile. The post was gone. Not just deleted, scrubbed. It was as if it had never existed. I checked Kendra's profile. She had just posted a generic inspirational quote about peace and positivity. I checked Darlene's feed. Silence. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. The dynamic had shifted. For 29 years, they had controlled me with shame. They had controlled me with the fear that I was not enough, that I needed their approval to exist. They used noise, laughter, shouting, bragging, to keep me small. But I had discovered that silence was a much more powerful weapon. They were terrified. For the first time in their lives, they were walking on a floor that wasn't steady. They were realizing that the freelance job they mocked had taught me how to document, how to archive, and how to present evidence. They realized that the victim had become the judge. I finished my coffee. It was cold now, but it tasted sweet. I was not safe yet. I knew that. People like Gavin and Darlene do not give up power easily. They retreat, they regroup, and they attack from a different angle. They were scared, yes, but fear makes people dangerous. They would stop shouting, but they would start plotting. I needed to be ready. I needed to make sure that my evidence was not just a threat, but a fortress. I walked back to my laptop. I opened a new tab and searched for whistleblower protection laws. The game of psychological checkers was over. We were playing chess now, and I had just taken their knight. 2 days after the birthday dinner, the phone rang. It was not Darlene, and it was not Gavin. The caller ID displayed a name I had not expected to see so soon. Aunt Elise. Elise was my father's sister, the one who had sat on the ottoman in my parents' living room begging for a loan to save her teeth, only to be turned away with a lecture on fiscal responsibility from people committing grand larceny. I stared at the screen. I had not told Elise anything. I had kept her out of it to protect her. Or maybe because I was afraid she would be too fragile to handle the truth about her brother. I answered on the third ring. "Hello?" I said, my voice cautious. "Quinn?" Elise sounded breathless, like she had walked up a flight of stairs too quickly. "I just got off the phone with Darlene. She told me something concerning—" I leaned back in my office chair. Of course Darlene had called her. Darlene was doing damage control. She was poisoning the well, reaching out to every family member to plant her version of the narrative before I could release mine. "What did she tell you, Aunt Elise?" "She said you are having a crisis," Elise said. "She said you are making up stories about Gavin because you are stressed about work. She said you threatened to ruin the family reputation over a piece of cake. She wanted me to call you and talk some sense into you. She thinks you might listen to me." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. It was a brilliant move. Darlene knew I had a soft spot for Elise. She was weaponizing my own empathy against me. "Do you believe her?" I asked. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the static of the line. "I do not know," Elise said quietly. Darlene sounded very convincing. She was crying. "But something does not sit right. Quinn, you have never been a liar, and you have never been cruel. The things she said you did, blackmail, hacking, it does not sound like you." "It is not me," I said, "but she is right about one thing. I do have information about Gavin." Elise hesitated. Is it bad?" "It is criminal." "Elise." The word hung in the air between us. "Quinn." Elise's voice dropped to a whisper. "You have to be careful. You know how they are. If you make accusations without proof, they will crush you. Gavin has money now. He has lawyers. He told me he hired a retainer for a firm in the city just in case." I sat up straight. "He does not have money. Aunt Elise, I said, my voice hard. He has stolen money, and he did not hire a lawyer. He is bluffing. Then came the question that changes everything in a family that runs on secrets. Do you have proof? Elise asked. Do you actually have evidence, Quinn? Or is this just something you suspect? I looked at the folder on my desktop. Project Icarus. I have the emails. I said, I have the altered invoices. I have the metadata from the photos. I have the bank statements showing the deposit. I have everything. Can I see it? I paused. Sharing the files with Maya was one thing. She was a contemporary, a cousin. Sharing them with Elise, a member of the older generation, felt like crossing a Rubicon. It was an act of open rebellion against the hierarchy. If I send this to you, I said, you cannot unsee it, and you will have to make a choice. Send it, she said. I asked for her email address. I generated a secure, read-only link to the cloud folder. I hit send. I will call you back, she said. She hung up. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment. I tried to work, but the lines on my screen blurred together. I was waiting for the shock. I was waiting for the denial. Elise was kind, but she was also passive. She had spent her life letting Darlene and Gavin walk all over her. I feared she might look at the evidence and decide it was too much, that it was better to bury her head in the sand than to confront the monsters in her own bloodline. 45 minutes later, my phone did not ring. Instead, a notification popped up on my screen. You have been added to the group conversation. Jacob's Family Connect. I stared at the notification. This group chat usually lay dormant for months, reviving only for holiday planning or to share photos of someone's graduation. Darlene was the administrator. I opened the app. Darlene. Everyone, please settle down. We need to address the rumors circulating today. Gavin. It is harassment. Plain and simple. I am documenting everything. Kendra. Quinn, seriously? You dragged Aunt Elise into this? She is blowing up my phone. She is hysterical. Darlene. Quinn, I removed you from this chat previously for your own good, but I am adding you back so you can apologize. Tell everyone right now that you made a mistake. Tell them you are confused. I watched the messages roll in. They were trying to encircle me. They were trying to use the pressure of the collective to force a retraction. Then, a new message appeared. Elise, I am not hysterical. Kendra, I am reading. Gavin, reading what? Whatever garbage Quinn sent you is fake. It is photoshopped. She is a graphic designer. Elise, that is what she does. She makes fake things. Elise, she did not fake the bank transfer number. Gavin, I used to work in billing at the library. I know what a routing number looks like. Darlene, Elise, stop it. You are stepping out of line. This is a private matter between Quinn and her parents. Elise, no, it is not. You told me you had no liquidity. Darlene, you told me you could not help me save my house because all your money was tied up. But I am looking at a credit card statement here from November. You spent $3,000 on a dinner the night before Thanksgiving. You spent $500 on wine. Gavin, we have the right to spend our money how we want. Stop counting our pockets. Elise, it was not your money. My heart hammered in my chest. Elise had found her voice. The woman who had been silenced by poverty was now shouting with the authority of the truth. I typed my first message into the chat. Me. It is all in the folder. Everyone. The dates. The times. The admissions of guilt in the emails. Gavin. That is illegal. You hacked my mother's computer. I am calling my lawyer right now. You are going to jail. Quinn, you are going to prison for cyberstalking and data theft. Darlene. Quinn, listen to your uncle. He is serious. Remove the files immediately or we will have to let him proceed with legal action. We cannot protect you if you break the law. They were doubling down. The threat of the lawyer was their favorite cudgel. They relied on the fact that the rest of us were afraid of conflict, afraid of legal fees, afraid of the system. But they had forgotten one thing. Elise was not alone anymore. Elise. I forwarded the folder to my neighbor, Mr. Henderson. The chat went silent for a full minute. Darlene. Who is Mr. Henderson? Elise. He is a retired contract lawyer. He worked for State Farm for 30 years. He specializes in insurance fraud. The air in my apartment seemed to drop 10 degrees. I could feel the cold dread seeping through the screens of 3 different smartphones in the suburbs. Gavin, you showed our private family business to a stranger? Are you insane? Elise, I asked him if the documents looked fake. I asked him if it looked like a graphic designer made them up. Kendra, and? Elise, he said no. He said they look like a slam dunk indictment. I smiled. It was a vicious, satisfied smile. Elise, he said that specifically. The email where Darlene tells Gavin to use matte paper to hide the edits is evidence of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. He said that carries a mandatory minimum sentence in federal court. He said it is not a civil dispute. It is a felony. No one typed. The 3 dots that usually indicated someone was writing, the bouncing bubbles of Darlene's indignation, of Gavin's rage, of Kendra's panic, did not appear. The chat was a tomb. I imagined them in their separate houses. I imagined Darlene gripping her phone, her face draining of color as she realized that her resourcefulness was actually a crime labeled conspiracy. I imagined Gavin, the big man, the loud man, staring at the word federal and realizing that his brother-in-law's golf connections could not fix this. I decided to drive the nail home. Me. Mr. Henderson sounds like a smart man. Did he mention what happens to the accomplices? Elise. He said anyone who knowingly benefited from the proceeds of the fraud could be liable for restitution. He asked if anyone else went on those vacations to Cabo. Kendra has left the conversation. I laughed out loud. Kendra, the corporate climber, the one with the reputation to protect, had bailed the second the heat got too close to her pristine resume. She was not going to go down with the ship. Darlene. Elise, please, you are blowing this out of proportion. We can explain. Let's just meet for coffee. Just us sisters. Elise, I do not want coffee. Darlene, I wanted to keep my teeth. I wanted to pay my mortgage. You let me beg while you were sitting on $175,000 of stolen money. Gavin, it was an accident. I was hurt. Elise, the metadata says the photo was taken 5 hours later. Mr. Henderson laughed when he saw that. He said it was the sloppiest attempt at fraud he had seen since the 90s. Darlene, stop talking to him. You are going to get us all arrested. Elise, I am not the one who committed the crime. Darlene, I am just the one reading the file. I watched the screen. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had inverted. The people who held the purse strings no longer held the power. The power was held by the poor relation and the black sheep, armed with nothing but a PDF reader and a retired neighbor. Me. So, here is how this works. You are going to stop threatening me. You are going to stop lying about me on Facebook. And you are going to stop pretending that you are the victims here. Gavin, or what? Me. Or I let Mr. Henderson call his old friends at the State Farm Fraud Unit. He said he still has the direct line to the regional director. There was no response. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, a single notification appeared, but it was not a message. Gavin has left the conversation. Darlene did not leave. She stayed in the chat, a silent observer in the room she had built to control us. She was alone there now. Her daughter had fled. Her brother had fled. Her sister had turned against her, and her daughter, the one she had served a half-eaten cake to, was holding the keys to her cell. I sent one last message, just for her. Me. The cake was dry, by the way. I closed the app. I did not block them. I did not mute the notifications. I wanted to see if they dared to speak again. But the phone remained dark. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a playground bully who had just been punched in the nose, realizing for the first time that their victim had grown up, and that the game was over. My phone rang again. It was Elise. He says he can draft a letter, she said, her voice trembling but stronger than I had ever heard it. Mr. Henderson, he says if we want to push this, we can. He says we have a duty to report it. I walked to the window. The city looked bright and alive. Not yet. Aunt Elise, I said, let them sit in it for a night. Let them wonder. Let them look at the door every time a car drives by, wondering if it is the police. That fear is better than any jail cell. You are scary. Quinn, she said softly. I was taught by the best, I replied. I hung up. I went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. I took out a small, store-bought cupcake I had purchased on my way home the night before. It was whole. It was perfect. I lit a candle. I blew it out. And for the first time in 29 years, I made a wish that I knew was going to come true, because I was the one making it happen. The forensic accounting phase of a family collapse is less dramatic than the dinner table explosion, but it is far more lethal. It does not involve screaming or throwing cake. It involves paper. It involves timestamps. It involves the cold, hard friction of mathematics against mythology. The process began formally 7 days after I sent the final warning to the group chat. It did not start because I called the police. I did not have to. The insurance company, it turned out, had algorithms that were smarter than my mother. Mr. Henderson, acting on Aunt Elise's behalf, had made a subtle inquiry, not a report, just a question about policy verification regarding duplicate invoice numbers. That single question was the pebble that started the avalanche. Gavin received a notification of a comprehensive claim audit via certified mail. I saw a copy of the letter because Gavin, in a panic, had forwarded it to Darlene, and Darlene, in her carelessness, had left her email logged in on the family tablet that Maya now possessed. Maya sent me the screenshots. The language was clinical. The insurance company was requesting the original metadata for the site photographs. They were requesting bank statements verifying the out-of-pocket payments to the chiropractic clinic. They were requesting a sworn affidavit regarding the timeline of the slip and fall. It was a procedural death sentence. The discrepancies I had spotted on the laptop were no longer just files in a folder named Project Icarus. They were now exhibits in an investigation. The $4,500 invoice that Darlene had mocked up in Microsoft Paint was flagged for font inconsistency and non-standard tax calculation. The timestamp on the photo of Gavin writhing on the floor, the one taken 5 hours after the alleged incident, was noted as a critical timeline anomaly. Gavin's transformation from the grieving victim to the cornered rat was instantaneous. He stopped going to the country club. He stopped posting on Facebook. The loud, booming laugh that had dominated my childhood was replaced by the silence of a man waiting for an indictment. He tried to claim the records were lost in a computer crash. The insurance company replied that they would be happy to subpoena the clinic directly for their copy of the records. Since the clinic had never issued a bill for $4,500, Gavin was trapped. Throughout this first week of the investigation, my mother went silent. It was a terrifying silence. Darlene was a woman who filled every room she entered with noise and opinions. When she was quiet, it meant she was calculating. She was not texting me. She was not calling me. She was ghosting her own daughter, likely consulting with lawyers who were telling her that conspiracy to commit wire fraud was not something she could charm her way out of. But while Darlene retreated, my father stepped forward. It was a Wednesday evening. I was working late in my apartment, refining a layout for a client. When the buzzer rang, I checked the camera. It was Walt. My father had never visited my apartment alone. He had only ever come as Darlene's driver, standing silently behind her while she critiqued my furniture or my neighborhood. Seeing him standing there in his beige windbreaker, looking at the camera lens with a mixture of confusion and defeat, felt surreal. I buzzed him in. He walked into my living room and looked around as if he had never seen it before. He looked at my desk, my dual monitors, the sketches pinned to the wall. "You have a lot of work," he said. "I have a career." "Dad," I corrected gently. "Right," he nodded. "A career." He sat down on my sofa. He did not take off his jacket. He sat on the edge of the cushion, his hands clasped between his knees. He looked older than I remembered. The silence of the last week seemed to have aged him 5 years. "I wanted to tell you," he started, then stopped. He cleared his throat. I wanted to say that I knew the cake was half eaten. I looked at him. I was standing by the kitchen island, keeping a safe distance. I know you knew. Dad, you were sitting right there. No, I knew it was wrong, he said, looking up at me. His eyes were watery. I saw the waiter put it down. I saw Gavin laugh. I saw the look on your face. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell the waiter to take it back. I wanted to tell Gavin to shut his mouth. But you didn't. I said, it was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. I didn't, he whispered. I never do. That is my sin. Quinn, I let Darlene run the show because it is easier. I let Gavin be Gavin because confronting him is exhausting. I thought if I just kept my head down, the peace would be worth it. He took a shaky breath. But it wasn't peace, was it? He asked. It was just silence. And you were the one paying for it. I felt a lump form in my throat. I had waited 29 years for my father to protect me. He was 29 years too late, but the acknowledgement still landed with the force of a physical blow. Why are you here now? Dad? I asked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He placed it on the coffee table. Gavin asked me to give you this. He said, it is a check. He thinks if he pays you off, you will tell the insurance company that you doctored the files. He thinks you can stop the investigation. I looked at the envelope. I did not touch it. And what do you think? I asked. Walt looked at the envelope, then at me. I think you should burn it, he said. I stared at him, stunned. He stood up. He smoothed his windbreaker. I told Darlene I was coming here to convince you to settle. He said, that is the only reason she let me leave the house without 20 questions. She is terrified. Quinn, she knows she is named in the emails. She knows she is liable. He walked to the door. I am not going to ask you to stop. Quinn, he said, his hand on the doorknob, you are doing what I should have done years ago. You are telling the truth. I just wanted you to know that I am proud of you, and I am sorry. He left before I could respond. I stood there for a long time, looking at the door, then at the envelope on the table. I picked it up. I tore it in half without opening it. I did not need to know the number. No number was high enough to buy back the past. The next day, the silence from Darlene broke. She did not call. She did not text. She appeared. I was walking out of my apartment building at 8 in the morning, heading to a client meeting. She was waiting in her car, parked illegally in the loading zone. She jumped out as soon as she saw me. She was not wearing her usual pristine makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She looked frantic. Quinn, she shouted, rushing toward me. We need to talk. Now. I have a meeting. Mom. Cancel it. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. This is more important than your little meeting. Do you have any idea what is happening? The insurance investigator called the house this morning. He wants to interview me. Me. He wants to ask me about the photos. I pulled my arm away. I stepped back, creating a physical boundary on the sidewalk. Then you should tell him the truth, I said calmly. The truth? She laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. The truth is that you are a vindictive child who misunderstood a family strategy. Look, Quinn, I can fix this. I have a plan. We can tell them that the laptop was compromised. We can tell them that the files you found were generated by a virus. We just need you to sign a statement saying you cannot verify the source of the data. That is all. Just sign it, and this all goes away. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a document. It was already typed up. I looked at the paper. It was a lie. It was another layer of fraud to cover the first layer. I am not signing that. Darlene. She stared at me. Her eyes narrowed. The panic shifted into rage. You have to, she hissed. If you don't, they are going to charge Gavin. And if they charge Gavin, they come for me. Do you want to see your mother in court? Do you want to see your family destroyed? You destroyed it yourself. I said, you destroyed it when you decided to commit a felony. You destroyed it when you decided I was worth less than a half-eaten cake. You destroyed it when you taught Gavin that he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. I am your mother, she screamed. Passers-by stopped to look. She did not care. I gave you life. And I am using that life to be an honest person. I said, something you never taught me. I stepped around her. She blocked my path. If you do this, she said, her voice dropping to a low, venomous growl, you are out. I mean it. Quinn, no inheritance, no Christmas, no family. You will be dead to us. I stopped. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the threat. I saw the weakness behind the anger. And for the first time, the threat of being cut off did not feel like a punishment. It felt like a parole hearing. I looked at the street, at the morning sun hitting the pavement, at the busy city moving around us. I thought about the files on my computer. I thought about Aunt Elise, who had finally stood up for herself. I thought about my father, who had finally apologized. I realized that I did not need Darlene's money. I did not need her approval. And I certainly did not need her version of family. You cannot cut me off. Mom, I said quietly, I already left. I left the moment you served me that cake. I walked past her. Quinn, she screamed after me. Quinn, come back here. I did not turn around. I kept walking. I heard her shouting. I heard the car door slam. But the sounds were fading. They were becoming background noise. I walked toward the subway station. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was probably her. It was probably Gavin. It was probably a threat. I did not check it. I walked down the stairs into the station. I swiped my card. I moved through the turnstile. As the train pulled into the station, a rush of wind hit my face. It smelled of ozone and steel. But to me, it smelled like oxygen. Pure, unpolluted oxygen. I sat down on the plastic seat of the train car. I opened my bag and took out my laptop. I had one more email to send. The insurance investigator had left a voicemail on my phone earlier that morning, asking if I would be willing to cooperate with the inquiry regarding the metadata. I opened my email client. I typed a reply. Dear Mr. Henson, I am in receipt of your request. I am confirming that I am willing to provide a full deposition regarding the files found on the device. I can verify the chain of custody. I can verify the dates. I have nothing to hide. Sincerely, Quinn Jacobs. I hit send just as the train lurched forward. We moved into the dark tunnel, picking up speed, heading toward the light at the next station. I was not afraid of the dark anymore. I was the one holding the flashlight, and for the first time in 29 years, the direction I was heading was entirely up to me. The weeks that followed my departure from the subway station were defined not by noise, but by a strange, settling quiet. It was the kind of quiet that follows a fever breaking. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up without the crushing weight of impending criticism pressing down on my chest. I did not check my phone for angry texts before I opened my eyes. I did not rehearse apologies while brushing my teeth. I simply woke up, made coffee, and started my day. My career, which my family had spent a decade dismissing as a hobby, began to flourish in the vacuum they left behind, without the constant drain of their emotional demands. I found I had energy reserves I never knew existed. The project with the tech startup in Austin, the one Darlene had rolled her eyes at, went live 3 weeks after the birthday dinner. The branding was a hit. The client was ecstatic. They did not pay me in exposure. They paid me in a wire transfer of $5,000, followed immediately by a retainer offer for ongoing design work. When the contract arrived in my inbox, I sat staring at the salary figure, $85,000 a year, plus benefits. It was real money. It was stability. It was proof that the narrative Gavin had spun, that I was a financial burden, a failure, a girl who needed a handout, was a lie. I printed the contract. I signed it with a steady hand. I did not call my mother to brag. I did not post it on social media to prove them wrong. I just filed it away in my drawer, a private victory that tasted sweeter than any public applause. I also started seeing someone, not a boyfriend, but a professional. Doctor. Aris was a woman with kind eyes and an office that smelled of lavender and old books. I paid for the sessions myself. It is interesting. Dr. Aris said during our third session, after I had recounted the story of the cake, you talk about that night as if you were surprised. But deep down, you knew the cake would be half eaten, didn't you? I looked at the ceiling. I knew. I admitted. I always knew. I just kept hoping that if I pretended not to notice, they would eventually stop serving it to me. We spent hours dismantling the architecture of my guilt. I learned that my role in the Jacobs family had been that of the shock absorber. I was designed to take the bumps so the rest of them could enjoy a smooth ride. When I stepped out of the car, they started feeling every pothole in the road, and they hated me for it. They called it betrayal. Dr. Aris called it boundaries. I began to build a life outside of their orbit. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from because I was always too busy managing family crises. I went to a potluck dinner at a colleague's house. I brought a lasagna. When we sat down to eat, nobody insulted my job. Nobody asked how much my rent was. Nobody made me the punchline of a joke. At the end of the meal, there was one piece of garlic bread left in the basket. My colleague, Sarah, picked it up and held it out to me. "Do you want this, Quinn?" she asked. I froze. My instinct was to decline, to say that I did not deserve the last piece, that someone better, someone more important, should have it. I shouldn't, I stammered. Sarah just smiled and dropped it onto my plate. "Eat it," she said. "It is just bread." I ate it. It was warm and buttery. It was a small thing, a microscopic moment in the grand scheme of the universe, but it felt like a revolution. I was allowed to take up space. I was allowed to have the last piece. While my world was expanding, the world of the Jacobs family was rapidly shrinking. I did not ask for updates, but the information trickled down to me through the channels I had kept open. Maya and Aunt Elise. Maya came over for dinner one Friday night. She looked tired, but her shoulders were lighter. She had stopped attending the Sunday dinners. "It is a ghost town over there," she told me, twirling pasta on her fork. "Darlene resigned from the garden club board." "She resigned?" I asked. The garden club was my mother's fiefdom. She had ruled it with an iron fist for 15 years. "She was asked to resign," Maya corrected. "Apparently. Rumors travel fast. Someone at the club has a husband who works in insurance. He heard about the audit. He heard about the metadata. They did not want the bad press." I took a sip of water. I felt a pang of something, not sadness, exactly, but a distant, hollow echo of pity. My mother's social standing was her armor. Without it, she was just a woman in a big house with too many secrets. "And Gavin?" I asked. Maya let out a short, dark laugh. "Gavin is melting down. The dealership is under internal review. Corporate came down to audit the books after the insurance news broke. They found irregularities in his expense reports. He is not going to jail for that, probably, but he has been put on administrative leave. He is sitting in that giant house with the jukebox he bought with stolen money. And he has nobody to talk to because he blocked all his friends on Facebook in a paranoid rage. He thinks everyone is laughing at him," Maya added. "He is right," I said. The most surprising update came from Aunt Elise. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was strong, vibrant. "Mr. Henderson is helping me file a claim against Gavin's estate." She said, "His estate? Is he dead?" "No," she said, "but his assets are frozen pending the investigation. Mr. Henderson says that since Gavin claimed poverty to deny me the loan while holding illicit funds, I might have a civil case for emotional distress or, well, legal terms I do not understand. But the point is, I am not scared of him anymore. I walked past him in the grocery store yesterday." "What did he do?" I asked. "He turned his cart around and ran down the cereal aisle," she said. "He couldn't even look at me." I hung up the phone and looked out the window of my office. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the city. I thought about Gavin running away from his sister in the grocery store. I thought about Darlene sitting alone in her living room, no longer the queen of the garden club. I checked my internal emotional barometer. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to feel a surge of vindictive joy. I had won. I had taken down the giants. But I did not feel joy. I felt relief. It was the relief of a survivor who finally reaches the shore after treading water for years. I did not want them to suffer. I just wanted them to stop winning at everyone else's expense. I wanted the scales to balance. The universe, it seemed, was finally doing the math. I looked at the calendar on my wall. It had been exactly 30 days since the birthday dinner. 30 days since the half-eaten cake. My phone buzzed on the desk. I picked it up. It was a text message, but not from Maya or Elise. It was from Mr. Henson, the insurance investigator. We had exchanged several emails over the last few weeks as I provided the documentation he needed. He was professional, thorough, and devoid of drama, everything my family was not. Mr. Henson, good afternoon. Ms. Jacobs, the forensic analysis of the metadata and the financial cross-referencing is complete. The legal team has finalized their conclusion. I stared at the screen. The text bubbles danced for a moment. Mr. Henson, we are moving forward. The official findings will be released to the involved parties tomorrow morning at 9. I thought you should know. I set the phone down. Tomorrow morning. It was over. The investigation was no longer a threat. It was a verdict. The house of cards that Darlene and Gavin had built on lies, intimidation, and Photoshop was about to meet a hurricane. I stood up and walked to the mirror in my hallway. I looked at my reflection. I looked tired. Yes, there were dark circles under my eyes from the late nights working on the Austin project, but the eyes themselves were clear. They were not darting around looking for approval. They were steady. I was 29 years old. I had a career. I had a therapist. I had friends who shared their garlic bread. And tomorrow, I would have the truth, written on official letterhead, signed and sealed. I went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. There was a slice of cheesecake in there, left over from my dinner with Maya. It was a whole slice, perfect, triangular, unblemished. I took it out. I got a fork. I sat down at my small, wobbly kitchen table. I did not wait for anyone to sing. I did not wait for anyone to tell me I could eat. I took a bite. It tasted like freedom. Tomorrow, the bomb would go off in the suburbs. Tomorrow, the screaming would start again. But tonight, in my quiet apartment, there was only the sound of a fork hitting a plate and the silence of a girl who was finally, completely full. The email arrived at exactly 9 in the morning on a Thursday. It did not have the dramatic flair of a text message or the emotional volatility of a phone call. It was a PDF document attached to a standard corporate email from the Special Investigations Unit of the insurance provider. The subject line was stark: Final determination of claim number 899201. I opened it while sitting at my desk, a mug of tea warming my hands. The document was 10 pages long, but the conclusion was summarized in a single paragraph on the first page. The investigation had determined that the evidence submitted for the claim was materially altered and fabricated. It cited the metadata discrepancies I had flagged. It cited the non-existent invoice from the chiropractic clinic. It cited the witness statements that contradicted the timeline. The judgment was absolute. The insurance company was demanding immediate restitution of the full settlement amount, $175,000. In addition, they were imposing a civil penalty for the cost of the investigation, totaling another $12,000. The final sentence was the one that would stop hearts in the suburbs. This matter has been referred to the state attorney's office for review regarding potential criminal charges for insurance fraud and conspiracy. I read it twice. It was the language of consequences. It was the language of reality crashing into a fantasy world. My phone began to ring 3 minutes later. It was Maya. I answered, putting her on speaker. "It is happening," Maya whispered. Her voice sounded like she was hiding in a closet. "I am at the house. I came over to drop off some mail. And, Quinn, it is a war zone." "What is happening?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Gavin is here," she said. "He drove his truck over the lawn. He stormed inside, screaming at Darlene. He is saying it is her fault because she sent the email about the matte paper. He says she left the digital trail. And Darlene? She is screaming back. Maya said, she is throwing things. I heard a vase shatter. She is screaming that Gavin was too stupid to keep his mouth shut, that he spent the money too fast. She is saying she only helped him because he begged her. They are eating each other alive. Quinn, they are blaming everyone but themselves. I listened to the description of the chaos. I tried to imagine the living room where I had spent so many silent, uncomfortable holidays. I imagined the pristine white carpets, now stained with the mud of Gavin's boots, and the debris of broken porcelain. It was the end of the image they had worked so hard to curate. The perfect family was not just cracking, it was detonating. Did they mention me? I asked. Maya hesitated. Yeah, Darlene said. She said you are a snake. She said she wishes she had never invited you to the dinner. Gavin is saying he's going to sue you for leaking the documents. Let him try, I said calmly. He can explain that to the state attorney. I hung up. I did not feel the need to listen to their screams. I had heard them scream at me for years. About my hair, my job, my choices. Now they were screaming at the mirror. My phone buzzed again. It was a group text. Darlene had created a new chat. Excluding Gavin, likely to rally the remaining troops. Darlene. Quinn, you need to fix this. Call the investigator. Tell him you made a mistake. Tell him you were angry and you forged the metadata yourself to hurt us. If you take the blame, they might go easy on you because you have no assets. We can pay for your lawyer. Please, Quinn, do it for the family. I stared at the message. Even in the face of total destruction, her instinct was to sacrifice me. She wanted me to confess to a felony I did not commit to save her from the consequences of the one she did. She thought so little of me that she believed I would walk into prison just to keep her comfortable. I typed a reply. I did not scream. I did not use capital letters. I did not defend myself. I sent 5 words. Me. I just stopped lying. I left the group chat. I blocked Darlene's number. I blocked Gavin's number. The bridge was not just burned. The ashes were swept away. An hour later, my buzzer rang. I checked the camera. It was my father. He looked different than he had the last time. He was not wearing his windbreaker. He was carrying a small suitcase. I buzzed him in. When he reached my door, he did not look at the floor. He looked at me. I left, he said. You left the house? I asked. I left the marriage, he corrected. He walked into my living room and set the suitcase down. I heard them arguing, he said, his voice steady but sad. I heard Darlene try to convince you to take the fall. I heard her say that you were expendable. He shook his head. I sat in that chair for 30 years and let her tell me who to be. He said, I let her tell me how to treat my own sister. I let her tell me how to treat my daughter. When she sent that text, something broke. I cannot be the man who watches his wife try to send his daughter to jail. I looked at him. It was not a heroic rescue. He was years late, but it was an action. It was a step. I am staying at a hotel tonight, he said. I just wanted you to know. You were right. Quinn, the silence was not peace. It was just cowardice. I nodded. It was all I could offer him. I was not ready to hug him. I was not ready to forgive him. But I accepted his truth. He left a few minutes later. At 6 p.m, the buzzer rang again. This time, I knew who it was. Maya walked in, her face flushed from the cold, carrying a white cardboard box tied with a satin ribbon. She looked exhausted but triumphant. Is it over? She asked, kicking off her boots. The investigation is over, I said. The consequences are just starting. She set the box on my kitchen table. Well, she said, I decided we needed a do-over, since nobody actually got to eat cake at the last party. She opened the box. Inside was a red velvet cake. It was round. It was perfect. The cream cheese frosting was smooth, swirling in delicate peaks. There were no jagged edges. There were no missing pieces. In the center, written in elegant dark chocolate script, were the words, for Quinn, the whole thing. I looked at the cake. It blurred slightly as my eyes filled with tears. I had not cried during the insults. I had not cried during the investigation. But seeing this circle of red and white, this symbol of being complete, broke something open inside me. Maya handed me a knife. "You get the first piece," she said, "and you can make it as big as you want." I took the knife. I cut a massive, unreasonable wedge. I put it on a plate. I took a bite. It was sweet, rich, and dense. It tasted like validation. We sat there for hours, eating cake and talking about the future. Maya told me she was applying for transfer to a university on the West Coast. She wanted to get away from the fallout. She wanted to start over, just like me. By midnight, Maya had fallen asleep on my sofa. The apartment was quiet. The city outside was a hum of light and motion. I sat at my desk, feeling a strange sense of finality. I opened my laptop to close down the Project Icarus folder. I was ready to delete it. The files had served their purpose. The truth was out. I moved the mouse to select the folder, but as I did, my eye caught a file name I had missed during the initial download 4 months ago. It was inside a subfolder that I had assumed was just old tax returns. But the file name was not a tax year. It was a name. Kendra. Severance Agreement 2024. I frowned. Kendra had not been severed. Kendra had been promoted. She was the Senior Vice President of Marketing. She had bragged about her team of 40 people at the dinner. She had lectured me about responsibility and success. I clicked on the file. It was a legal document from her company. It was dated 3 months ago, 1 month before the birthday dinner. Termination for cause. I scanned the document. The words jumped out at me. Misappropriation of company funds, falsified expense reports, unauthorized use of corporate credit card for personal travel. My eyes widened. Kendra had not been promoted. She had been fired. She had been caught stealing, just like Gavin. I scrolled down. There was a settlement agreement. She had agreed to pay back $25,000 to avoid prosecution. I sat back in my chair. The pieces fell into place. The reason Kendra was so obsessed with appearances, the reason she was so terrified of the scandal ruining her reputation, the reason she had pushed me to delete the files. She wasn't protecting the family name. She was protecting her own lie. She was unemployed, drowning in debt, and pretending to be a corporate superstar while lecturing me on my freelance career. I looked at the file. I looked at the sleeping form of Maya on the sofa. I looked at the half-empty plate of red velvet cake. I had destroyed Gavin. I had exposed Darlene. And now, sitting on my hard drive, was the torpedo that would sink the last remaining lifeboat of the Jacobs family superiority complex. I could send it to the group chat. I could send it to Darlene, who was currently relying on Kendra as her only successful child. I could post it on LinkedIn. I hovered my mouse over the file. A slow smile spread across my face. I did not send it, not yet. I realized that revenge is not just about the explosion, it is about the leverage. I knew the truth about Kendra, and knowing was enough. I would keep this file. I would keep it for a rainy day. I would keep it for the next time Kendra tried to look down on me. I closed the laptop. I did not delete the folder. I just minimized the window. I looked at the whole cake one last time. For 29 years, I had waited for them to give me a slice. Now, I owned the bakery, and for the first time in my life, I had the power to decide who got to eat. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed watching the Jacobs family finally get what they deserved, please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button, and smash the hype button so we can keep serving you the most satisfying revenge drama on the internet. See you in the next story.